A 41 drone assault raises new questions about Russia's air defenses few days back in the morning. While much of western Russia was still asleep, the distant thud of explosions and the sharp crackle of air defense fire broke the silence. Across multiple regions, including areas surrounding Moscow, air raid alerts were activated as Russian authorities reported a large-scale drone attack unprecedented in both scope and coordination. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, up to 41 unmanned aerial vehicles were launched in what officials described as a massive and coordinated assault. While Moscow insists the majority of the drones were intercepted, the sheer scale of the operation has raised fresh questions about the effectiveness, sustainability, and cost of Russia's much vaunted air defense shield. For Ukraine, the reported attack fits into a broader strategy of long-range strikes aimed at disrupting Russian logistics and challenging the perception that the war can be kept far from the Russian capital. For Russia, it represents another reminder that the conflict it launched more than 3 years ago continues to evolve in unpredictable and technologically driven ways. This extended report examines the events of that night, the competing narratives surrounding the attack, and the wider implications for the war in Ukraine and for modern warfare itself. The night Moscow was put on high alert, Russian officials say the first signs of the attack were detected shortly after midnight, when radar systems began tracking multiple unidentified aerial targets approaching from different directions. Air defense units were placed on high alert across a wide geographic area, stretching from regions bordering Ukraine to districts closer to Moscow itself. Moscow's mayor, Sergei Sobyanin, confirmed that air defense systems were activated on the outskirts of the capital. In a series of statements released via social media, he said several drones were intercepted before reaching the city, adding that emergency services had been dispatched to locations where debris had fallen. Residents in suburban districts reported hearing loud explosions and seeing flashes of light in the sky, consistent with air defense intercepts. Some described being awakened by the noise, while others shared videos online showing distant fires and smoke fumes. As a precautionary measure, Russia's aviation authorities temporarily suspended flights at several major airports serving Moscow. Aircraft were either grounded or diverted, causing delays and disruptions that rippled through the country's transport network. In addition, mobile internet services were reportedly slowed or restricted in certain areas. Russian authorities have previously acknowledged using such measures during drone incidents, as many unmanned systems rely on satellite navigation and mobile networks to guide them toward their targets. Official statements and the challenge of verification. The Russian Ministry of Defense later issued a statement claiming that the vast majority of drones had been successfully intercepted. It said there were no fatalities and described the damage as minimal. However, as with many incidents during the war, independent verification remains difficult. Russia tightly controls access to information related to military activity, and journalists are often unable to reach affected sites. Open source intelligence analysts, who examine publicly available data such as videos, satellite imagery, and eyewitness accounts, have attempted to piece together a clearer picture. Some footage circulating online appears to show fires at industrial facilities outside central Moscow, though the exact causes and extent of damage cannot be independently confirmed. Ukraine, for its part, has not publicly commented on the specifics of the operation. Ukrainian officials have consistently stated that they do not provide real-time confirmation of military actions, particularly those conducted deep inside Russian territory. This absence of detailed confirmation has created space for competing narratives, with each side emphasizing elements that support its broader strategic messaging. Ukraine's shift toward long-range drone warfare over the past year. Ukraine has increasingly turned to drones as a central element of its military strategy. Faced with shortages of long-range missiles and constraints on the use of Western-supplied weapons, Kyiv has invested heavily in domestic drone production. These drones, many of them relatively inexpensive compared with traditional weapons, are designed to travel long distances and strike targets hundreds of kilometers from Ukrainian territory. Military analysts say they offer Ukraine a way to project power deep into Russia while avoiding some of the political sensitivities associated with missile strikes. Ukrainian officials have framed the use of long-range drones as a defensive necessity. By targeting fuel depots, logistics hubs, and military infrastructure, they argue Ukraine can disrupt Russia's ability to sustain operations on the front lines. The reported use of foot-in-one drones in a single operation suggests a deliberate attempt to overwhelm Russian air defenses through sheer volume, rather than relying on a small number of high-value weapons. Ukraine appears to be testing whether massed, low-cost systems can achieve strategic effects. Moscow's multi-billion-dollar defense shield Moscow is widely regarded as one of the most heavily defended cities in the world. Over the past decade, Russia has invested billions of dollars in layered air defense systems designed to protect the capital from a wide range of threats. These include long-range surface-to-air missile systems capable of engaging aircraft and ballistic missiles, as well as shorter-range systems designed to intercept cruise missiles and low-flying targets. In addition, Russia has deployed extensive radar networks and electronic warfare capabilities intended to detect and disrupt incoming threats. However, many of these systems were designed with conventional military threats in mind. Small drones, particularly when launched in large numbers, pose a different challenge. They fly low, they can approach from multiple directions, and they are relatively cheap, says one defense analyst. Intercepting them with high-end missiles is not only technically challenging, but also extremely expensive. This cost imbalance has become a recurring theme in discussions about modern air defense. A single interceptor missile can cost hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, far more than the drone it destroys. What were the likely targets? Russian officials have not disclosed details about what the drones were aiming at. However, analysts monitoring the conflict suggest several categories of potential targets. These may include fuel storage facilities and energy infrastructure, which play a crucial role in supporting both civilian life and military operations. Logistics hubs, rail junctions, and warehouses linked to the Russian military are also seen as likely objectives. Some experts suggest the attack may also have been intended to probe Russia's air defense coverage, identifying gaps, response times, and patterns that could be exploited in future operations, even if few drones reach their intended targets. Analysts say the intelligence gained from such an operation could be valuable. The information war almost as soon as reports of the attack emerged. The information battle began. Russian state media emphasized the effectiveness of air defenses, highlighting official statements that portrayed the incident as a failed attempt to cause serious damage. Ukrainian commentators and sympathetic analysts focused instead on the scale of the operation, arguing that the ability to launch such a large number of drones toward Moscow itself was significant. Social media platforms were flooded with videos, claims, and counterclaims. Some footage was later found to be from earlier incidents or unrelated events, underscoring the difficulty of distinguishing fact from misinformation in real time. For audiences both inside and outside Russia, understanding what actually happened requires careful analysis and a degree of caution. Civilians and the psychological impact for many residents of Moscow, the war has largely been something watched on television rather than experienced directly. While previous drone incidents have occurred, they have often been limited in scale. This attack, by contrast, was widely felt. Residents reported being awakened by explosions and seeing emergency alerts on their phones. In some areas, schools and businesses briefly delayed opening as authorities assessed the situation. Psychologists note that even limited attacks can have a significant psychological effect, particularly when they occur close to home. The sense of distance that has characterized much of the war for residents of major Russian cities may be gradually eroding. International reaction and diplomatic balancing international reactions to the reported attack have been cautious. Western governments have largely refrained from commenting on operational details, emphasizing instead broader principles. Officials in NATO countries have repeatedly stated that Ukraine has the right to defend itself against Russian aggression. At the same time, they have urged restraint to avoid actions that could lead to further escalation. Russia has accused Ukraine of targeting civilian areas, a claim Kiev denies. Ukrainian officials insist their operations are aimed at military and strategic infrastructure. The incident underscores the delicate diplomatic balancing act faced by Ukraine's allies, who seek to support Kyiv while avoiding a direct confrontation with Moscow. Strategic implications for Russia. From a strategic perspective, large-scale drone attacks pose a difficult challenge for Russia. Protecting cities like Moscow requires substantial resources, including personnel, equipment, and interceptor missiles. Those same resources are also needed on the front lines in Ukraine, where Russian forces face ongoing pressure. Analysts say Moscow may be forced to make difficult choices about where to deploy its air defense assets. If you move systems back to protect the capital, you potentially weaken your forces elsewhere, says one military expert. It's a trade-off with real consequences. Economic costs and long term pressure beyond immediate military considerations, repeated drone attacks carry economic costs. Airspace closures disrupt travel and trade, while repairs to damaged infrastructure strain local budgets. The use of expensive interceptor missiles adds to the financial burden. Over time, these costs can accumulate, particularly in a prolonged conflict. Russia has already increased spending on defense and security, and analysts say counter drone technologies are likely to receive even greater investment in the months ahead. A war defined by technology, the reported 14-4 drone attack highlights a broader trend in modern warfare, the growing importance of relatively simple, low cost technologies. Drones have transformed battlefields around the world, from surveillance and reconnaissance to direct attacks on military and civilian infrastructure. Their accessibility has lowered the barrier to entry for long range strikes, changing the calculus of defense for both Russia and Ukraine. Adapting to this reality will be crucial. While many details of the reported drone assault on Moscow remain unclear, the incident marks another significant moment in the evolution of the war in Ukraine. For Russia, it raises uncomfortable questions about the resilience and cost effectiveness of its air defense systems. For Ukraine, it underscores a strategy aimed at stretching those defenses and demonstrating that distance no longer guarantees safety. As the conflict continues, drone warfare appears set to play an even greater role, bringing with it new challenges, new risks, and a heightened sense of uncertainty for all involved.